I'm James Smith, author of Other People's Politics, Populism to Corbynism, a book available now from Zero Books. It's a study of the so-called populist moment of the long 2016 that we're still living through, and the surprising kinds of political actor that it gave rise to, ranging from the right-wing populism of Donald Trump to the extreme Euroscepticism of Britain's Leave campaign. It also examines more oddball formations such as the online alt-right and the intellectual dark web, through to, perhaps most surprising of all, the return of a radical left in the form of Bernie Sanders in the States and Jeremy Corbyn in Great Britain. Now, I know what some of you lot in the comments section are going to say. You're going to object that Corbyn and Sanders are not truly radical, and indeed are scarcely even left-wing, that these people merely want to preserve capitalism or invent a kind of safe and contained version of it. And I actually think this is a very interesting criticism and a very important one. Probably my first reply, though, would be to simply cite Aimee Therese on the matter, which is to say that nobody is to the left of Bernie Sanders, just as nobody is to the left of Jeremy Corbyn. Why? Well, all those people who claim that, I'm actually to the left of Corbyn, but I just support him tactically. All those people who say that the project is to defend Bernie, but to push him to the left on certain issues. Aimee says that actually all of these people are merely kind of cultivating a sort of politically useless or indeed apolitical brand of leftism in the full commercial sense of the term, or even worse, they're merely kind of creating a sort of academic packaging, whereas Corbyn and Bernie are the only people right now who have the opportunity to actually substantially move things to the left. So by that token, I kind of agree that nobody, in fact, is more radical than Bernie or Corbyn, and nobody is further to the left than either of them. Nonetheless, more generously, I suppose, I think it is worth stressing, and it is worth noting that, well, put it this way, I think that one valid criticism of my work and previous videos that I've done is a tendency, which I think is common to all Corbynistas, to refer to neoliberalism when we might otherwise refer to capitalism. Of course, the effect of this is to imply that only this kind of late decadent, peculiarly cruel and accelerated form of capitalism is the malign thing. That kind of post-war sweet spot moment had something going for it, and actually all we need to do is return to social democracy. I have to confess that I kind of agree that it is a peculiarity of the Corbyn-Sanders moment that it's actually incredibly difficult to even utter the word capitalism in this context. Some people, well, let me say this, it may even be that this current resurgence of the radical left and this current resurgence of a truly mass left is the first one, and is unique in this respect. It's the first to not have produced a new interpretation of Marx. It's the first to have come about actually with Marx a relatively silent figure in the whole thing. Now, I'm sure some people would argue that this is its kind of fatal flaw, and that this is a kind of ominous aspect of the Sanders and Corbyn project, and a hint that it will ultimately fail or ultimately prove reactionary in some kind of fatal way. That's not really my kind of my temperament, let's say. I'm all about the optimism of the will, for better or worse. What I would say is, and it will have to wait until after the election next week to even begin thinking about it, what I would say is that it would be an extremely interesting project for us to be thinking about, to ask what would it mean to talk about Marx in the age of Sanders and Corbyn? Where are we going to find a Marx for this particular moment? Some kind of forum, some kind of set of arguments or series of videos would be really valuable on that topic. So, in Other People's Politics, I'm especially interested in the way in which these new political formations that I'm describing have so consistently been digitally mediated, one way or another, dependent on the existence of, what Nick Cernak would call platform capitalism, what Shoshana Zuboff would call surveillance capitalism, the existence of these big, relatively unregulated platforms which spread information and create communities and forms of political agency in surprising ways. Trump's Twitter account is a kind of totemic example of how certain assumptions behind digital media and right-wing populism have ended up peculiarly well-fitting bedfellows. If we thought only a decade ago that digital media was going to take us into some sort of high-tech, frictionless, apolitical utopia where everybody was would experience the world as one of limitless connectivity, if we thought of Obama and Silicon Valley as somehow perfect partners, it's surprising quite how quickly that has spun around into the reverse and allowed Trump to become synonymous with social media and a politics of building walls and appealing to the most interiorized and twisted desires of individuals and so on. But it's not only true of Trump, it's true of all of the examples that I allude to discussing, allude to the fact that I discuss in the book. Part of my interest is that this long 2016 has shown that, in fact, the left can meme, in the words of another excellent Zero book available right now. And we saw that in Britain in 2017 in the general election, where Corbyn's Labour Party just totally wrong-footed and amazed everybody in showing that the so-called radical left is capable of achieving power through electoral means. Okay, we did not form the government in 2017, but what we did achieve in depriving a hitherto popular conventional prime minister of her majority and winning a pretty unheard of in recent times share of the vote proved that the left can do it. Next week we'll find out if Corbyn's Labour is able to finish the job. In the book, I describe the way in which Corbyn himself and his supporters exist in quite a peculiar and I think usefully described as left populist kind of relationship that is both acknowledges the need of the special place of the leader figure, but also includes a lot of horizontal elements. I discussed that in my last video for the channel. What I want to consider today is the way in which digital tools and digital memes and so on have played a major role in the success of the Corbyn project in 2017, and also to give a little bit of an update about what is going on right now. So most of the digital innovation that has come out of the Corbyn project has been attached to Momentum. This was a group that was set up out of the framework of the campaigning group that made Corbyn leader in 2015. The people involved basically acknowledged that Corbyn was going to receive a hell of a lot of hostility from within the Labour Party, so needed a sort of base of operations outside the party that could kind of defend the left from, with its own tools and mechanisms. We could have a very interesting conversation about how successful momentum has been between elections, but nobody disputes how extraordinarily successful it has been as an electioneering body. During the 2017 election, the official Labour Party campaigning already took on one of Momentum's chief innovations from Corbyn's original leadership contest, an app allowing supporters to make calls on behalf of the party and on behalf of Corbyn to potential voters, potential supporters from their own homes, on their own mobile devices. This meant that you no longer had to go along to an official phone bank. You could now make those calls on behalf of the party wherever you were on your own phone, and you could kind of fit it into your daily life in a new kind of way. Their new innovations included something called My Nearest Marginal, which directed supporters to the constituencies and areas where their campaigning could have the most effect. They introduced a carpooling app in order to get people to those ideal campaigning locations, and they also used kind of innovative broadcast WhatsApp messages, Snapchat memes, and so on, using existing forums. This is what I describe as the digital libidinal element of Momentum's campaigning, the way in which the most successful political actors online of the past few years of, as I say, this long 2016, have not simply treated social media and digital media as a straightforward tool with which to amplify an existing conventional message. Rather, the most successful political movements online in the past few years have, as it were, recognised the way that desire already works on digital media itself, and kind of integrated and ingratiated themselves with that, matched their message with the way in which we use digital media anyway. In Momentum's tools, there was suddenly no separation between highly organised collective politics and the ordinary pleasures of using apps to socialise, to communicate with people, and to organise our kind of social world. They recognised that it wasn't enough to kind of keep party structures the same, but simply advertise them online. Rather, campaigning itself had to reorganise itself around the way in which we already take pleasure, already have our desire solicited by this digital technology. In this current election, we're seeing yet more innovations. My Nearest Marginal has been replaced by a much more kind of agile and responsive My Campaign map, which is constantly updated and also doesn't only direct campaigners to places based on their marginality, based on how effective an individual's vote would be. It also constantly updates itself with reference to which areas already have the most campaigners there, that kind of thing. So this is, this is smart technology in the most vulgar sense, meant by Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, but it's being used for left-wing purposes. This week they've announced a new platform called My Plan to Win, which basically is a kind of calendar where you put in every day which activities ranging in importance you're going to do every day to contribute to the election in its last week and a half. So this is acting like some kind of Outlook calendar or personal organizer or online journal, but again it's being used to maximise left-wing campaigning. Now, I can anticipate the criticism that there is something sort of gimmicky about this use of apps, use of devices, use of people's pre-existing online habits to the purposes of the left. I can anticipate the criticism that there is maybe something temporary and impermanent about this, that it doesn't represent a true left-wing solidarity, but really a kind of faddish, as I say, simulacrum of that. This criticism would link, of course, to the earlier one that I anticipated at the start of this video, that the Corbyn and Sanders moment has not produced a new engagement with Marx, precisely because it has not produced a new critique of capitalism. Rather, it has deferred that critique. You know, let's just offer these kind of limited social democratic reforms. Let's kind of hit reset and get back to something like the New Deal, and then maybe we can talk about capitalism at that stage. And like I say, I think that this is kind of an important criticism, and one that we need to have sight of and start more rigorously theorising from within Corbynism and from within the Sanders movement. And yet, at the same time, I'd make the case too that there's an argument to be had that if we're seeing young leftists campaigning using the most vulgar, alienated capitalist tools of Silicon Valley, there is something actually kind of appropriate about that, because what we are not seeing today is a sudden mass left emerging because everybody involved has been kind of intellectually converted to socialism overnight. Everybody has freed themselves from the trash can of ideology, is seeing clearly at last, and can understand the truth. Rather, on the contrary, what we are seeing is a return of the left precisely out of the frustrated desires of neoliberalism itself. These young people have not betrayed the neoliberal structures built and believed in by their parents. Rather, they have, as it were, taken them too literally, believed in them too much, been structured by them too much, and when neoliberalism has not delivered on its promises, they are responding in a perfectly understandable, frustrated way. Today's left, we might say, is not some kind of return to an old lost solidarity. Rather, it's a kind of cry precisely of a frustrated neoliberalism demanding, where's my everything? We can think here of the way in which elder millennials were promised in the early 2000s at the high point of the third way that they would be owning a house, that they would be earning more than their parents, and generally that they could forego radical politics, they could ignore the kinds of radical indulgence that had been permitted to their forebears in their youth, because actually capitalism was going to deliver for them too. Those people are now in their 30s, in their 40s, and are looking around and finding that none of those promises were delivered upon. Actually, they are living through a time of compressed wages, a time of impossibility of buying property, all of the kind of buy-ins that neoliberalism would have offered to middle-class younger people have been frustrated, have been denied. There's an argument to be had that the celebrated youthquake, which characterised Corbyn's success in 2017, was just as much as that a rentquake. Similarly, we can see in the way in which digital technology is being employed by the left today, a way in which precisely those kind of desires, precisely that sense of the demand for the things that we're entitled to, has played into leftist hands. And this is a tendency which I see nothing to be gained in resisting. Actually, this is a kind of tendency that we need to play through and see how it works out.